Alice worked at Menlo Atherton High School as the college advisor for 20 years, including having my two kids. Since her retirement, she has continued to help students find their way to college through MA, the Boys and Girls Club of the Peninsula, and the Redwood City Library. During her career, Alice was active in the National Association for College Admission Counseling, the Western Association for College Admission Counseling, and the College Board. Please join me in a really warm welcome for Alice and Gabby and Michael and Patrick. Take it away, Alice.
Okay, thank you, Charlene, and welcome everyone. One thing Charlene didn't mention, but I like to remind people, is how amazing the Parent Education Series is as a resource. And especially because attendance at these events is always free. But that does not mean that donations are not welcome. And Charlene never brings it up herself. But if you appreciate the series and if you can afford it, I hope you'll donate what you can. I'm about to introduce you to three people who have two important features in common. They all have years of experience in college admission, and they all make me laugh. What more credentials could they need? Michael Elgarico serves as the Vice President of Enrollment Management at the California Institute of the Arts, better known as Cal Arts. Michael was the Dean of Undergraduate Admission at Cal Lutheran while teaching in the Graduate School of Education there, and he's worked in a variety of roles at Stanford, Fordham, Northeastern, and UMass Amherst. Gabby McColgan has been in college admission counseling since 2002. In addition to her positions at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, Stanford University, St. Margaret's Episcopal School, Sacred Heart Prep, and now Castilleja School, Gabby is also an active member of the National and Western Associations for College Admission Counseling. She serves on college advisory boards, and she's a regular presenter at regional and national conferences. Patrick Wilson has worked in college admission for 16 years, and he currently serves as the Director of Admission Marketing and Events at Willamette University in Salem, Oregon. He's worked with students throughout the Western United States, including the San Francisco Bay Area, and abroad. Patrick has also served as president of the Pacific Northwest Association for College Admission Counseling. And a third quality that all of us share is our love of high school students. We find them always endearing, occasionally challenging, endlessly interesting, and sometimes funny. I'd like to kick off our conversation by talking about what we see in students' application essays. Maybe that's because I'm immersed in reading dozens of them right at this time of year. Oh, by the way, do we have anyone here from Sequoia High School? Sequoia boasts a thriving international baccalaureate program, and application readers from all over have giggled when they receive essays where students tout their school's international bachelorette program. Oh, autocorrect. And don't you love reading about the courses students have taken that are college predatory? So students themselves are dumbfounded when I tell them that certain words amuse college application readers. The two that jump to my mind are plethora and myriad. Please close the thesaurus, students. Patrick, Gabby, and Michael, will each of you please offer an anecdote about something amusing you've seen in applications? And Gabby, maybe you can tie it up by telling us why students do this and why, though these examples may give us a laugh, we understand and we are not making fun of the students. Who wants to start? Michael, why don't you start?
It was the proverbial, not me, I won't start.
Nice
so thank you so much, Alice, for the thank you, friends, for the grace introduction, and thank you for all the families and students in attendance for tonight. So I will say this much, between the four of us here, the number of applications that we've reviewed or touched goes beyond probably the population of the world. We've seen a lot. My glasses were a lot thinner then, but after a number of years of reading both domestically and students from overseas, I think thematically, there's two things I want to mention. With all these ways to apply, many students often will kind of just copy paste schools back and forth. And interestingly enough, I will say there are many schools in Boston and there's many schools on the West Coast, which are very prolific in nature. And sometimes even just kind of with the autocorrect, there's a Northwest and there's a Northeast. And sometimes you will see certain incongruencies where like, I cannot wait to go run with a particular school that's all West Coast focused, but I'm pretty darn sure is in New England. It doesn't make sense when you put it together. So I will say this much, we don't want to question your fundamental geography skills when it comes to where you're applying. We have to do that institute-specific institutional question. The other thing which is really notable, and I take nothing away from the aspiring or current athletes in the world, but man, there must be a lot of ACLs being torn between the ages of 15 to 16, and I don't really love knowing all the glorious details of said procedure. I tried to pre-med, and there's a reason why I did a 180 and became a political scientist, not a real one. But with that said, though I appreciate that, I think there's a lot of other things that we can talk about beyond standard medical procedures and the very thoughtful descriptions and details. I would love to learn more about you as a person, then about the anti-inflammatory medication that you really had a hard time monitoring during your recovery process. So all joking aside, you all have amazing stories to tell. We just want to hear them and in a thoughtful way that really reflect careful thought, attention to detail, and eloquence. So that's my kind of start off to the conversation. I'll head it up north to Patrick if he wants to take it from here.
Yeah, I have a rule with my parents at the dinner table, and it's no medical talk, and I would prefer to transfer that to college essays as well. Although if you need an ACL fixed, I think I could do it, and I majored in journalism. So, you know, I think the other piece that always comes up as we're looking at all of these, and I recently joined the Willamette team, but I have actually been reading why students wanted to attend Willamette at my prior institution, which was a competitor. So every once in a while we just see that, oh, I'm just really interested in Willamette. It's like, cool, I don't work there, but that's good to know. So definitely being able to make sure that as you're looking at those Common App, they go to everyone. Once you submit it to one, it just goes right on out there. We put a why Willamette question in our member questions section. We think that's the best place. We only get that here. I always, as a journalism major, I got to take grammar in college. I am no longer a grammar expert. I don't think I ever was, but I did pass the test I needed to back then. I always love creative semicolons and other punctuation skills. If you don't use punctuation when you're texting, it's probably not a good idea to try out something new when it comes to your college essay, because it's probably not going to land right. And it's just really demonstrating, I think, those wild attempts at impressing us beyond that belief. So keep the medical talk away from your essay. Just use normal grammar.
I'll jump in. One of the things that I think students try to do a lot, and I know I can speak for the many wonderful students that I've worked with over the years, I think they're always trying to come up with a unique essay topic, right? I have to write about the thing that nobody else has written about. And I cannot stress enough that when admissions officers are reading tens of thousands of essays, it's very unlikely that you're going to come up with the topic that nobody else has thought of. However, it's you. Your story is unique just because nobody else is like you. So don't worry about the topic you're going to write about. Just use your own voice, and that's what makes it unique. And one of the things that makes me giggle a little bit, and I'm always trying to pull my own students back from trying to do very dramatic opening sentences and opening paragraphs, right? As I walked into the auditorium, not a pin could be heard dropping. And then I mean, it's just, if you do a dramatic reading, it is over the top dramatic. And so I think You don't need to do that. You don't need to have dramatic scene setting. You're not looking for your Pulitzer Prize. This is not the moment. Use your own voice. Just start your story and trust that the way that you write and the way that you speak is great. You don't need to partake of anything. There's a lot of partakes that are sprinkled into essays. Participate is the word you would probably use in language. So just say the word participate. And I would also mention that, a lot, especially for the University of California, and my guess is that there might be some people in the audience tonight who are thinking specifically about the University of California with some deadlines coming up, those personal insight questions. Those personal insight questions, they're really just about telling the things that you've done and why you are proud of the things you're done and that you have done. There's no need to tell fancy stories for those personal insight questions. Save the room for telling them about your achievements and your leadership and the things that you have managed to deal with during high school, in addition to all of the learning and leadership that you've taken on in high school. So why do students do this? I know I'm blaming the internet. I so often blame the internet, but don't we think, so there are plenty of people out there who think, hey, I got into college. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to share the things that I put into my application on the internet. Because even though I have no idea how I actually got into college, for all we know, this person was admitted despite this essay or despite something in their application. I know that I'd like to share it with other people who might be looking to do it. So another piece of advice I would give to students, don't look for examples on the internet. Just write your own story, write your own essays. There's no right way to do it. And there's nobody on the internet who's got the right way for you to write a story. So don't copy somebody else's essay, be yourself.
Gabby, I think I'll jump right onto what you just said, because I hate it when people say piggyback on. I'm going to jump right on what you just said and say, I also blame the people out there who tell students, here's what you need. You need to have a hook.
Oh no.
And when students hear about a hook to launch their essay or personal insight question, they immediately believe that hook is synonymous with gimmick. And they start with these gimmicky things that are so unnecessary. So what I tell students is, you know what? It's not a hook. Write me a first sentence that makes me want to read your second sentence.
Yep.
Write a second sentence that makes me want to read your third sentence. You've done it. So can you guys remember some specific essay topics or things that you've read that gave you just a bit of a giggle? I'm thinking of the girl who was just brilliant and had done a million interesting things, but insisted that she should write her her essay about asking her boyfriend to prom in Jell-O.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well,
what a delicious topic.
I remember very vividly an essay I read many, many, many years ago before I even started working in high school. I think a student was trying out their first stand-up comedy routine, but I couldn't be sure. But the essay was about why euthanasia for the elderly was a really good idea. And it was not, I wouldn't have done it, is what I'm saying. I wouldn't do it.
Sensitive topic for me since I'm in there. Don't try out your first comedy routine. I hope it was a comedy routine. I'm still not sure.
But if I may, Gabby, that's the thing I hope people remember. You don't want to be, infamous for all the wrong reasons, right? Like that's the part which also, we can probably come up with a lot more, probably not for the general audience, better perhaps offline, because some of the things that come across our guests are, beyond the PG-13 rating. And you're just kind of like, and I've done this before, because in Gabby and I worked at the same institution where you have a committee process, and where you speak, you have to read aloud certain excerpts. And there are times where like, did they really just read that? And, be mindful of your audience. Can I say this was interesting? I come from an immigrant family background, and it's so interesting, like hearing stories of compelling situations, scenarios, and it was fascinating. It's tongue in cheek but they drew this like Game of Thrones landscape building. They're like, and here is the place. And I was like, ah, this sounds really familiar. And they're like, and the mountains and the fields. And I was like, and the sad people there. And I was like, where is this going? And they were talking about a place not far from where my family was, from the country from where they came from. And they're like, the sad people of this nation. I was like, okay, I'm checking my bias today, but you gotta know, it's like, know your audience. That's what we call the proverbial moonwalk away, friend, when you think you're gonna talk about somebody else's culture, if it's not your own. You know, it's kind of like, this is just, you wanna be mindful. And you know, it's understandable. You're trying to worldview, you're trying to show empathy and altruism, but that can be taken as some people would say. Some people like cilantro, some people don't. It's a flavor preference, and some people will not take that very well. So I'll leave it at that. But Gabby knows what I'm talking about. There's days you're like, you can't unhear things, and then it just becomes how you should be candidate. So.
And then you literally see the candidate sometime.
Yes,
Like,
and you're like, hi, you're the one.
the one. I need to talk to your parents.
So
Yeah.
one of the things Michael just pointed out is that what you have on the other end, if you're a student sending off an application and with the essays, you have human beings on the other end. I think you are just figuring that out. I think what Michael was kind of asking people to do is think about the human beings on the other end. They are human. You don't know. And the people at the other end are really good at checking their biases. I know this for a fact, and I trust them, but they are real people. Are you real people, Patrick?
I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a duck the size of my head back there. So, but it's true. I mean, you just do not know. I think there's so many assumptions put into this process. I know what somebody wants to read. I know what I need to do to get that hook or whatever. And it's so infrequent that a student actually asks in a productive way, what are you looking for in an essay? I'm going to sit for an interview. What does that entail? What should I do on my campus visit that will be productive for me? So there's so many other voices in there, and it's really hard to figure out with so many things, not just college admission, but so many things in life. Who do I listen to? Who do I ignore? But in some cases, yeah, like we're going to have to read this out loud, or I'm going to meet you, or I'm going to meet your parent, or your parent's going to call me. And you might have said something that I'm now having to parse out in a less than funny situation. Who knows this information and what am I supposed to do with it? Or is there somebody on campus that I need to let know about the situation? Because there's this kind of gaming of this process and of the system to try and figure out. And that's kind of, I think, sometimes the less funny side of it. But at the same time, you know, you just don't know who's reading this other side of the application and the other side of the essay that you may inadvertently offend, even though we are trying really hard. And I think we really try as we train new professionals to remember you've got to leave your thoughts and experiences with certain topics and with certain situations out of the review process.
So thank you for those panel. But besides the essay, what do you really hope not to see in an application? You do, of course, want the student to send in her kindergarten science project, right? Don't you?
I recommend that all of my students do this. Yes.
I want perfect attendance awards, specifically. I need to know that you've been in school all the way through.
I personally like it when they won the potato sack race on field day on 3rd grade. I like those little plastic medals they get. This is my East Coast sarcasm if you haven't noticed. Can I backtrack a little bit, Alex? Because that's the interesting part here. We don't join this work because we like to crush the lives and dreams of students. This is not the theme here. We are looking for reasons to admit, right? And I think it's so funny, like we kind of are so passionate about it. We're giving this guidance. We want to make sure you don't fall into those traps, which are kind of really easy to avoid. And we always want to have a sense that you have agency to put your best foot forward. And we're looking for those thoughtful themes and ways to better understand who you are and how you can be a great citizen of any respective institution that you might be looking at. So it's interesting when you what we're looking for. I'm hoping to not cross any landmines in the process where I'm like, oh, that one was interesting, or like falsities, like grandeur, delusions of grandeur about what they do. Like, I am the strongest man in the world. And I'm like, let me look up strongest man in the world. That's not an 18-year-old student, like it's little things like that. You don't want to draw attention away. I'm not saying I'm going to deny you for that, but I will wonder integrity and, proportionate sense of validity in what you're writing. It's, and I think Gabby does a great job of helping students understand that there's a genuine nature we're trying to extrapolate from a student, right? And all the flowers in the world and all the fancy table setting you're doing doesn't mean anything if there's not a thoughtful self coming forward in the application.
I often use the phrase less is more with my students, right? That colleges know what they need from you, and they've hopefully given you clear instructions. So if you're applying on the common application, there's clear number of activities, the text boxes tell you how much space you have. And the goal is not to try to fit everything into those spaces. The goal, right, is to curate all of the interesting things that you've done and the things you spend your time on and love to do or need to do to support your family. To how do you curate and fit all of that into the space provided, and then to trust that these wonderful, thoughtful people who are reading your applications with a lot of joy and respect have all they need to know. And if they, for some reason, needed more and they needed more information, they would ask you for it. And I think that's something that maybe we don't think about a lot, but giving them everything, throwing it, we laugh about the kindergarten certificates, but we laugh because that's actually been done. You don't need to do that. It doesn't even go into the file, right? It goes into a special place where no admission officer sees that information. That's not a thing. So say it again, Alice.
Is that the circular file?
We used to say the circular file back in the day when there was paper applications. It's all electronic now, but yes. Okay. But if you've done this amazing activity, just describe it in the 150 characters they give you and trust that it sounds great. You then don't need to send pictures of the activity or newspaper articles of that activity. I would argue that actually takes away from it. Keep it short and sweet, and that's the way to sort of make your story powerful.
Okay, so the kindergarten science project thing, you're not going to need that. Okay, so two other great sources for laughs, if we're looking for laughs, include when families visit colleges and take tours, and also when college representatives visit high schools and talk to students there. I bet all three of you have some examples of times that those have amused you. Talk
I
to
had
us
somebody
about
ask me this week during a school visit how close we were to the Willamette River. So every once in a while you just get a question that kind of throws you. I don't know our distance to the river, but I came up with you can walk there. But I think, here's somebody trying to connect with you, trying to be funny themselves, maybe trying to get out of class, and whatnot. And it's like, this is what I'm taking away from this conversation. You're a jokester. And you've got to wait at least 15, 16 years for a career in college admission to become a jokester. So that kid's got a while to go. And you also got to get to know Alice Kleeman, because that's when she invites you on a panel. But, I think, again, students are trying to impress us with these conversations and with these things in these school visits. And again, just coming and being yourself and being able to say, yeah, I'm interested in this school and that sort of a thing. School visits are a whole heck of an amusement, though. You can do a whole hour on that.
I will just say this much. Now working at an arts institution, you don't need to bring your portfolio with you. You don't need to bring a PowerPoint. You're here to tour the campus. And more often than not, the tour guide who's doing the tour is not an admission officer. So when you show up with like here, and it's like, I have my hard drive, my film, I'm going to sing for you right now. It's like, that's good. I'm so glad you're ready to do those things. But on the campus tour is not the time to partake in said display of talent. I think it's wonderful. It's kind of like save it for the big night, save it for the application, right? We've worked at institutions where there's hundreds of students. It doesn't mean we don't care about you, but that's your time to tour the campus and ask the right questions. Now, funny family behavior, I have a couple of stories. One is where families, though I appreciate that you're there with your son or daughter or your child, let them ask questions too. I always makes you laugh because my parents will do this, like, ask them that question. I'm like, why don't you ask them the question if it's that important to you? Ask them if the food planning is included. Hi, I want to know if the food plan is included. It's like, oh my gosh, like it's just awkward the whole time. So it's like, here's the best part. After the tour tip, you can still talk to someone after the tour is over because they usually say, does anybody have any questions? So if you don't get the question out of the dining hall, how good the vegan options are, you can ask at the end of the tour just as equally, which is really nice. Now, quick tip for the parents, if you're going to show up without your student and you have something to talk to us about, you might want to think about the need to come visit. If I can share a story, Alice, which always comes to mind about a process I had at one institution where in my earlier days of the work, we used to all have front desk duty and hang out at the front desk and welcome visitors. And I happened to work with a number of students from a number of different time zones. And so with that said, I was sitting there and a parent showed up. We had released decisions at the institution I was at. And the parent asked to speak to a certain Michael. And I was like, well, my goodness, that's me. How can I help you? And the parent, who had flown, quite a distance of time zones, as I mentioned earlier, said to me, I'm here because my student is on the wait list. And I'm like, did someone tell you to show up at the front desk? I'm so confused. Why are you here? And they proceeded to say, I'm so sorry. Do you think the reason why they are on the wait list because I was busy preparing Thanksgiving dinner and I was not there to help guide them on their essay process? And at the same time, there are families equally here who just want to know the average GPA and SAT score. So what's really interesting there is I want you to, number one, save your miles for something more fun. And number two, there's this powerful thing called Zoom and internet where we can have thoughtful conversations. And I can guarantee you, if you spent too much time working on the stuffing or the mashed potatoes, that's not the reason why your son or daughter is on the wait list. Please remove that level of pressure on yourself for this holiday season, whatever faith or tradition you have. It has nothing to do with that process. More than likely, it's a really competitive institution and it's not a reflection of you, it's a reflection of the pool. So please know that. Please fly somewhere more fun, not to my office reception space. So that is all I will say.
But Michael, didn't you once have a parent visit from many, many, many time zones away who really just wanted to know about the real estate of the area so that parent could move there?
I think that was actually one of Gabby's people.
That was one of my people. I think so. I had a family many years ago who based kind of encouraged their child to apply to colleges based on where they wanted to purchase their next home. And I do not recommend this for your child, for you. There are other ways to find a nice geographic location to purchase a home. My heart just was so heavy for this child who I don't think got to actually choose their own college list. It was really all about where were the condos really nice and good walking distance to the train. So it's, that was one that I remember. And I always want to encourage you parents, probably don't plan to move where your child is going to college. And if you are planning that, I hope that your child is at least in the conversation. I can only speak for myself, but if my parents had moved to where I was going to college, I would have immediately transferred colleges, and it just would have been a game of leapfrog for months and months and months. So is leapfrog? No, I don't know if leapfrog the right word, but yeah, so a little independence in the college process and that list building is important, and certainly they need your input, but you shouldn't probably control it 100%.
At least with the transfer option, once the student was enrolled, their records are their records, and so they could transfer and they wouldn't even have to tell their parents until the bill came.
Now you're scaring all the parents, Patrick. They're like, don't you transfer on me. That's the best part.
I will tell you, years ago, I had a student call me. They had applied to my institution and had not enrolled. and they called it Thanksgiving. It's always at Thanksgiving, because they come home for break and they're like, this was a terrible choice. And so the student called me and said, I think I made a mistake. Could I transfer for the spring semester? What would that look like? Blah, blah, blah. I tell the kid, here's how this works. I get a call like 3 hours later. Hi, this is so-and-so's mom. Oh, hi, it's good to hear from you. I spoke with your son earlier today. Yeah, I know, I went to Costco and he's transferring schools. What the heck is going on? I was like, well.
Is the moral of the story, parents should not go to Costco?
That's what I heard. Don't cook
That's
Thanksgiving
what I
dinner.
heard.
Don't
shop
cook
at
Thanksgiving
Costco.
dinner and don't go to Costco. Or if you're gonna go to Costco, make sure you take your kid with you.
It's true.
Do you remember some other memorable things from visits in either direction?
I
Oh,
will
I-
always, oh, go, Michael, you go.
Here, just a quick tip. When I used to work for one institution, I went to a high school and there's a student that showed up and everybody was looking at them in this very peculiar way. And then the college rep, the Gabbies and Alice's of the world came to us like, Michael, do you know who that is? And I said, oh, I'm sorry. Are they not? I know them. I'm visiting high school. And then they disclosed, oh, I saw on the internet that you were visiting the school. So I'm from a high school 2 towns over. So I came here because you're not coming to my school. It was so awkward because you're kind of like, well, thank you for your adamant interest, but now I think you're about to be escorted off the premises for security purposes. Thank you. Have a nice day. Like, it was, and also was like, how did he get in here? It was just this kind of hilarious moment. And I was like, I kind of flung my business card. Email me with a question. Like, I can't talk to you right now. And the best of the culture was like, I gotta talk to our front gate. I don't know what's happening here. And I was like, I'm here till Wednesday. I'm just here to answer questions. So when you see high school visits, if they're not coming to your school, don't worry. You can email and find out who the college admissions rep is in your area, or more than likely, there'll be a nice, huge college fair from one of our associations happening. And just know that if you don't make the visit, it's not the end of the world for most schools. You can connect with them later. So no need to break an entry and hop a fence to go to a high school visit. You can stay at your high school and we'll connect you. Like the people like Gabby, we'll find out where that university or college will be represented. So save your gas money and just stay put. So yeah.
What were you thinking, Gabby?
I was the use of the word memorable reminds me of a mantra that we try to sort of have all of our parents practice. The first rule of visiting colleges is don't be more memorable than your child. And the second rule is don't be more memorable than your child. That is so critical. Let your child stand at the front of the tour. Let your child be the one who's engaging with the tour guide or the admission officer. I always, when I visit colleges, and I get to do it a lot and it's so much fun, I always like to peer over at the tours. And if I see parents standing up front, I always get a little sad. Stay at the back, let those students take the lead. And that's a really important lesson that you teach your children, that they are leading this process and you want them to be at the front. And if they're not ready to ask questions, that's okay. I always tell my students, if you hear a good question on one tour that somebody else asked, then you can steal it for the next tour that you're on. And that's okay. A great way to do it.
We've all been trained that there's no such thing as a dumb question, right? And I remember years ago, I actually thought, I have just heard a dumb question, but then the more I thought about it, the less I thought that. So a student said to me, I am planning to go to X name of college for baseball. Will I have to take classes too? And at first I thought, oh, I've just hit my first dumb question. And then I thought, no, given this child's background, and how often we've said, oh, he's going to such and such state for football or whatever, it couldn't be expected that this kid would know that classes are, part of the deal. And one college rep visit to my school, I remember that was hilarious, was somebody who visited every year and he always saw students, and A kid came in to talk to him, and then another kid came in to talk to him who really looked a lot like the first kid who came in to talk to him. Well, what this college representative didn't know was that we had triplets. And when the third one came in, this guy, who's pretty cool character, simply did not know what to do with himself. But that was fun. We can laugh at that. That's for sure. So another thing I was going to ask you guys, we're all psychic, right? Are we psychic? I think we're psychic, because if we're not, how do we know which adult might have contributed just a little too much to a student's application? How do we identify either a parent's hand or someone else's hand in the process? I feel that we're psychic because I know that we all can identify that. Tell me about it. What about it, Gabby?
Oh, I mean, it's usually fairly obvious. When the college essay starts to sound like a professional cover letter, then it almost always indicates that the parent has read a wonderful, heartfelt story and said, wait a minute, you're not selling yourself enough. We've got to get in there and I got to help you make yourself sound fantastic, forgetting that there are plenty of other parts of the application that allow you to talk about your resume. So I will say the cover letter essay is usually an indication of parental over support. And again, I know where it comes from, but that's not what the personal essay is for. To trust that your child sounds great just the way they are, just the way they write.
What do you think, gentlemen?
I mean, I think in some cases, this is why we still cling to our supplemental questions, because you can see they oftentimes don't get as much attention, shall we say, by the student or others. And so we see a distinct difference in the over editing or over contribution of others into the essay. And then you go to the short answer question and you're like, that doesn't sound like the same person wrote it. And it's just such a stark difference. The other thing is we go to those transcripts and we're like, this isn't the essay of a student who matches these English grades. And so there can just be some very factually based sort of observations that we can pull into play here, as well as sometimes just the vocabulary being used.
And you probably also
I think
see on the application, the parent's email address, right?
Sometimes even the parent's name, and that's never a good sign.
Oh, I mean, I've had parents call in the middle of the day and I've seen the number and I'm like, that's a place of employment. That's not where a student should be. And literally just, so I'm working on the application here. I mean, there was a few years ago, like they would at least say like, oh, I'm calling on behalf of my student. And then it became, we're working on the application. I've never used a keyboard with more than one person. I don't know how that works. Like, is it an A through M through Z? Do you get like the left and the, I don't know. And then it just became, I'm finishing up the application. And, you know, you can politely and sometimes not politely kind of call that out of like, oh, well, when your student goes in, when you're, you know, make sure your student understands what they're signing, and it just blows right by them.
So Michael, how are you psychic in telling who's had a hand in this work where we really believe we do see it?
I'll use this story. So we at previous institutions, you read by territory, right? So there's one admission rep that manages one high school or one area, right? And so I used to work with a lot of students from overseas. And I remember reading this really solid essay at the school where English was not, you know, the medium of instruction was about. You know, they have really solid English skills. It's really thoughtful and the themes were really profound. I was like, no, I can see it. So using the context clues, good English grades, good TOEFL scores, all wonderful, writing well. Then I move on to the next student. I was like, wow, they must have had this essay workshop at this school. Wow, that's exactly really the similar like closing sentence. Then it was literally just copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, and I was just like, oh my gosh, that, it's so funny. So how competitive you are with each other. You even did the check. Are you paying the same person to write my essay? Like it was just like one of those moments where you're like, oh my goodness, like it's okay to get guidance and to get support, but it's always good to kind of basic idea. Read it aloud yourself. And does it sound normal? Does it sound natural, right? Like often we try to speak in the way that we write and vice versa. Allison, Gabby, I'm a different person who I am versus my very professional Michael, Vice President of Enrollment. Like those are two different people. But when you try to do that and make it so over the top where I'm spending more time using a dictionary to understand and decipher. And I grew up with an ESL household. I'm like, I can't, my head hurts. Like, again, remember for all the wrong reasons, like not even plethora, not even myriad. It's just like indemnification. So you don't, so what? I thought we were talking about your ACL being torn, but okay, you use that word today. Well, I'll go with it. It's just kind of, we've been doing it for so long, right? And you go through the psychic moments it's more of spidey sense. That's what it is. You're like, oh, you Marvel fans out there, you're like, oh, something's wrong. And then you're like, you back away and you're like, something's not right. And it's not that we're going to penalize you, but it makes us pay more attention at the application in a different way. And I don't want that unnecessary attention applied. So,
Do you
Well,
think those students used a Groupon, Michael? Like a BOGO situation?
no, they use Living Social, Patrick. Come on now, it's not Groupon.
you guys are.
No, they went to Costco.
You buy essays in bulk. They come in a pack of 1,000.
Use them every year.
Every
I
year.
remember blowing a student away once. This was quite a few years ago when I had read his essay and I told him the name of the independent counselor that I believed that he was working with. And I thought he would explode. How did I do that? I'm not psychic and I don't have a lot of spidey sense, but I knew how that person used adjectives. And a 17-year-old boy doesn't use adjectives in that same way. So, and one of the things I've always told students is colleges are not asking 17-year-olds to do anything that 17-year-olds are not capable of doing. And if we remind them of that, I think they'll have a lot of less stress over, feeling like they have to put together something professional with words like indemnification.
Was that for a lawsuit?
You indemnify yourself. Yeah.
About the ACL.
Yeah, I was like, wrong word. This is not Mad Libs. Please walk away from the notebook.
Well, you can come back to this one if you think of more, but I have another question for you because this is one I don't think parents are going to know a whole lot about. So, Michael, you're an expert on something called student search. I bet parents don't know a lot about this, or students, but it relates to all those emails and texts that kids receive that cause them to just dash in to see us, and they're just crowing, I'm being recruited, I'm being recruited. Would you like to tell us what student search is and some of the surprises it brings? And Gabby and Patrick, please feel free to weigh in. But I think there's potential amusement in student search.
So in the best way, as equally as you're applying to institutions because you want to attend, we also want you to come, right? But part of that is trying to cast a wide net in terms of trying to pique your attention to come to our respective institutions. That is often what we try to say. We're trying to have you raise your hand and say, hi, I'd like to learn more about your college, your university. Simple kind of concept for you marketing folks, like who's a hand raiser here, right? It's not cold calling, but certainly your son or daughter may have taken a PSAT and ACT prep class, maybe signed up for a thoughtful organization that helps on college guidance. And on the back end, in the savvy world of marketing, institutions, big and small, west and east, are looking for those names, right? There's nothing dubious about this. It's more so like, well, we want to connect you with these institutions. I mean this in the most thoughtful way ever I've worked. Now is the time for us to say, we want you to apply. And in the process, we will pull a lot of different thoughtful gestures to engage with you. We might send you a letter, small, big, brochures. Schools might send you a kind of fun email that will say, did you hear from me yet? If you look, sometimes it might seem kind of spammy, for lack of a better word, but sometimes when it's in the college space, it is genuine. We want to hear from you. But one thing I want to temper with is that you are indeed special in your own world, but some schools will really lean in and say, you are the exalted, all high person I've never seen before in my life type of messaging. And you have to take that with a grain of salt, and knowing that if you don't reply to that message, if you don't like email us right away, don't worry, most schools are not going to penalize you because you didn't miss the 50 messages that came in, or the text that comes in. Hey, Gabby, you think about the messages? Patrick, I haven't heard from you in a while. Alice, when should I expect you on campus? Those are things you will likely see. I've been doing this for a while, but like those are the catchy things that they do. But number one, don't feel uncomfortable and think they're like stalking you. That's not it either. But it's also the idea that they're trying to pique attention, But all in all, no matter what, with all these, you probably have a pile already of things. Like there's parents in the room, like piles of messages. Don't worry if you can't reply to all of them. That's not the point. You find the one that works well for you, right? It's about kind of gaining your interest. But if you don't reply, some schools, it doesn't make a difference. Some schools want to see, and they will track and see how you're doing. But all in all, it's about your application process. Because no matter what, if you're not competitive, don't be like, oh my God, you told me when I was a sophomore that I should come visit. How dare you deny me? And I'm like, well, it's really your grades that denied you. It's not so much that you come in, So it's a lot of marketing out there. There's nothing wrong about this, how institutions work. So I want to put it in the most thoughtful, benign way that yes, you are being recruited along with a lot of other students. And if there's lots of deeper conversations what that means, but don't run to Ms. Kleeman's office or Ms. McColgan's like, oh my God, I just got a message. It's just for me, isn't it? You're like, people who got that email, but yes, that is very good that you got that message. So
Gabby,
just something to be mindful of.
To those messages.
I mean, so I think this is a great opportunity, Alice, for what's so funny about college admissions. This is when we get to laugh at the colleges a little bit. I'm just going to name it. Like they send a lot of spam to students, and students feel it. And sometimes you can even tell which companies are supporting the colleges with creating those emails, because they all have the exact same formatting. And you're like, wait a minute. So yeah, we get to laugh at the colleges a little bit, but Michael is absolutely right that it's authentic. They're trying to connect with students who might be good fits for them. We talk about this with our students a lot because we want students to be good researchers. We want them to know the colleges that they're thinking about applying to, and then certainly know the colleges that they are going to apply to. And being a good researcher means being on the mailing list of the colleges that you're thinking about. It means attending some of the virtual programming that they offer, or maybe even getting to go on campus, though that's never an expectation. It means, every now and then replying when they've asked you an actual question that you need to then follow up with, especially if you're an applicant in the pool. So you might hear the term demonstration of interest. Demonstrating interest it means that you are showing a college that you have taken the time to get to know them. And that doesn't mean you're emailing them 50 times, unless Patrick, Michael, if you're feeling lonely, the students can email you 50. I know, look, they're so bored. Email them 50 times. No. But authentic engagement that you would do to learn about a place is to see if it's the right fit for you and to see if you're the right fit for them is a really important part of the college research process. So sometimes those emails are great, and sometimes you need to learn how to use your Google filters. So you know how to unsubscribe, and you know how to find folders where those special emails go that you know that you're not actually going to have time to deal with. So make good folders, good labels in your Gmail or whatever email you use so that you can stay organized. And if you are have a college on your list and you need to be authentically connected to them, make sure that you're reading their emails. And this is why you shouldn't apply to too many colleges. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to manage that, because there's a lot to keep track of.
Such good advice. What are your thoughts, Patrick? You've worked at different institutions. Is there anything about student search that has amused you along the way?
Yeah, I mean, it always amuses me. And I have to say, I've had to review the search materials before they get sent out. And I'm like, no, like, because you do get this sent. It's like, now, can I see the other person you're writing for? Because I mean, you said the same thing. But I think at the end of the day, you know, it's like we are sending a lot of emails and we are sending a lot of materials out, and we are trying to engage you because there are so many schools out there, and everyone can't go to the same 10. And so we're trying to broaden that scope, and we really do want students of different geographic backgrounds and socioeconomic backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds and everything like that, and being able to enroll a wide variety of students. And but we're not a fit for everyone, and we only can mutually figure that out in the weirdest way of dating, by communicating and sharing about us, and then you being able to hopefully read some of it, not all of it. I wouldn't read it all, and I send it out. Nobody's got time for that. But at the same time, you can also see that unsubscribe link at the bottom. And if there's a school you're not interested in, don't come up to me at a college fair and say, you send me too many emails. Hit that link at the bottom and unsubscribe. Please do not reply with a swear word. We don't need that. Our students read that. They're nice kids. They're nice young adults. They don't need to read your swear words. So, you know, keep it professional and whatnot, but just break up with us when you're ready to. It actually helps us out a little bit. It means that next email invitation isn't going to 100,000 students, it's going to 99,999 students.
Good math, Patrick.
Thanks.
You know, Gabby mentioned demonstrated interest, and I will never forget one of the best pieces of advice I ever heard from a college admission officer who said, you know, students seem to think demonstrated interest is about how many emails the student sends us, or how many times you call, or do you visit. Colleges understand that not all students can visit, and no one will ever be dinged for that. So what this gentleman said was, the best way that you can show demonstrated interest is through your application. And if we can read within your application that you understand what we do, who we are, and why it's a fit for you, that's the absolute best demonstration of interest. And he was only partly referring to the why us question that so many colleges put on their applications. And I've had a lot of teaching to do in getting kids to understand how to respond to why us. But in the why us question and in the rest of the application, that is where students can show their demonstrated interest. And we now have quite a few questions from our audience, which is just great. And some of them are kind of more on the serious side, and some of them are responding to a little of our humor up here, if I guess if you can call it that. So I'm going to put some of these to you guys. Here's a really thoughtful one, and two people have actually asked the same question. How can an introverted student shine on paper if students would not be joining clubs or teams or leadership, or if a child is exceptionally shy? What are some of the ways you've seen those kinds of students shine? And they can be funny.
I mean, I always like to remind people that colleges are looking for all kinds of people on their campuses. We don't ever want any campus. I don't want my high school to be this way. I don't want the college to be this way. We want all kinds of students. So introverts, extroverts, ambiverts, everybody in between will be so valued and a critical part of a community. So I'll just start with that and then maybe pass it over to Patrick and Michael to see how that might look, but not everybody needs to be a leader. We need really good people who will follow as well. And we need really good people who will implement and do the work on the ground. So you don't always have to have a fancy title to be a critical part of your community.
And you can help them, Gabby, to show this.
Yeah, to talk about the things that you love. Maybe the thing you love the most is just sitting down with a really wonderful book. Tell us about the really wonderful book and why you love to read. And I would think that an admission officer would think, oh my gosh, this is somebody I want in my seminar room with my professors, right? They love literature. They're going to be in the library. They're going to be taking advantage of resources. So many different things that are valued on a college campus, just like there are so many different things valued in any community.
So Michael, when you see an application, do you recognize the kind of application we're talking about? I think at an arts school, it might even be more likely to come your way because maybe these students have a passion that is pretty solo.
And what's interesting is I want to honor Gabby's point. We're always talking about well-rounded versus angularity. And what I mean by angularity are just kind of abilities that you lean into, and especially at a visual performing arts school, is that we have a writing program for creative writers, right? Like they're not going to be running for class presidents. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, right? So remember, each institution that you're applying to has their own set of kind of values, criteria, and perspectives they're looking to bring that help shape their programs. I think Patrick and Gabby have both talked about that. So kind of trust in the system and being honest. And there's cases we can talk about revealing a bit of yourself, like, you know, I am a shy person. This is where I am in those kind of constructs. And sometimes some schools will ask for letters of recommendation, and hopefully those folks who are testifying on our behalf can add a bit of that. That, you know, leadership comes in a lot of different ways, and it doesn't mean you're out in front. It's in conjunction with what Gabby's saying is like you're leading by example, not by performative duty, and so that's a good thing, right? And so yeah, at an art school, I don't need everybody to be front center stage all the time. And that's why we have a directing program, costume design, you know, set design. Like it's kind of funny, it manifests in that way too. And these are folks who are passionate and they talk about that in their essays. They talk about what they want to do, why they want to be there. So personality type or not, it's the excellence that you're going to bring. So that's what you should really focus on. What does your son or daughter want to showcase as their point of excellence and what the gift they're going to bring to the institutional space?
And they don't all have to be raging dynamos. What do you think? Do you see these applications and you find that value in the introverted or shy person?
Yeah, and I think sometimes introverted is somehow somebody's trying to use that as a placeholder for uninteresting. And it's like, just because you're not at the front center stage, right? It's like, that doesn't make you not interesting. There are plenty of extroverted people who are not interesting. And there are plenty of introverted people who are very interesting. And I mean, even today I was reading applications and a student addressed the fact that they are not an extroverted person and have social anxiety, but then was able to speak to the ways that they've been able to engage. And I think I've seen a lot of this coming out of the pandemic because people were isolated. And so they're actually having to express how they were able to maintain and engage relationships or rediscover relationships or develop new ones. And then another one that I also happen to be reading today, to Michael's point of where that information comes in recommendation letters and whatnot, the counselor addressed that the student is a quiet leader and their school is better. And that student doesn't even necessarily recognize that because they're just doing that because that's who they are. And so again, like, yeah, the student was involved in other activities and whatnot, but it wasn't the team captain and it wasn't the student body president. They were a team member, and you still need people to pass the ball to down the court just because you're not the one who's scoring it. And so I should not have gone with the sports metaphor. But you know, to be able to have that supportive thing. And I think that's where sometimes that conversation with the Gabby in your school to say, well, what are you writing about me and what am I writing about myself? So that hopefully you're also telling a congruent story moving forward, and that things are coming up and backing up left and right.
That is a great idea. Well, I hope that you've gotten the sense from that colleges can recognize the beauty in a quieter student, and that there are ways that they can talk about themselves that will help them. Here's a question from our audience about something I hate, and that's standardized testing. Man, I hate it. And one of the things I hate right now is, and this parent who's asking the question has brought it up, most colleges now are SAT optional. And I know the meaning of the word optional, but do our students know the meaning of the word optional? No, they do not. Gabby, what are your students agonizing about?
It's so complicated right now. I wish that colleges, and I wish all colleges would just make a decision, right? I will look at scores, or we're not going to look at scores, because that would really simplify things from a student perspective. What do I know? I know that when a college tells you that they're test optional, that you can trust them. They're not lying to you. They are being honest. If you have a score to share because you feel that it's a value add in your file, and you're proud of that score, share that score proudly and trust that if it's going to help you in the review, it will help you in the review. If you do not have a score because you didn't test, or because you're not so great at testing, I'm not great at testing, and you don't need to share that score, nothing will be missing from your application, right? It's just that thing is not there. And so we are, as you can imagine, I'm looking really closely at the last, 15 years in college admission, because there's been test optional for decades and decades, right? There have been plenty of colleges who have never required test scores, SAT or ACT, and they know how to do this and it works just fine. But in the last 4 years, it's been a lot more test optional. We're looking really closely, and we're noticing it's not really controlling outcomes. So if your student does not feel that their test score is the right thing for them to share, they cannot share it, and that's okay. That's okay. And big applause to the colleges who are truly test free and are not needing those scores, or who just say, hey, we love scores. ACT, SAT, nothing brings us more joy than looking at a quantitative score of a 3.5-hour test. Sure, if that's what you want to do, go for it.
Anything further on that subject? My least favorite subject.
I was just going to say, ask the college the question.
Mm-hmm.
I think so often there's so much assumption and so much chatter going on. Otherwise, call me on the telephone and ask me, I have this score, should I submit it? Or I have a score in this, right? I don't remember, like, if you tell me your score, I'm not gonna remember it. I don't remember what I did yesterday. Call me up and ask me, should I submit this score? If you can't get an answer, or you don't believe the answer, you don't like the answer, that may be indicative of whether or not that institution is right for you.
Mm-hmm.
But email, call. I think sometimes it's like we aren't available. Like I sit here 8 hours a day, I'm available. I'm sad, I'm waiting for your essay. Remember?
Well,
So,
speaking of your essay,
ask us the question. That's why we go to high school. That's why we go to college fairs. That's why we hold interviews. That's why we do campus visits, because we want to get you the information.
and the four of us here on this screen right now have a really powerful level of trust in one another, from the high school side to the college side and back. I've written entire articles about this trust. It is crucial. And don't think when you call Patrick and say, here's my score, should I send it or not? You think he's secretly jotting it down and judging you and your application. That's not the way it works. I think we have time for 2 more questions that have come from the audience. And here's one. Tired topics of days gone by were the mission trip or the big win, you know, the buzzer, the torn ACL. Are there new topics that seem to be overused?
Oh, can I go first, Alice? Because
Yes.
this one makes me so nervous because I never want a student to think there's something they can't write about, right? Because if that's the story you want to tell, you should tell that story. And it goes back to the very beginning. You're not going to find a unique essay topic. I just don't think that essay topic exists, right? But you don't need to. You tell your story and that makes it unique. And so that's where I want to start. So I would never want to say there's a tired essay topic, because even though we might joke about, oh, we've read, 1,000 of these, it doesn't matter. I could still read one tomorrow that's one of my favorite essays of all time. And it could be about that torn ACL, and that's okay. That's okay.
It's not that the topic itself is a cliche. You can write about it in a fresh way. And if you can do that, there's nothing wrong with that. What do you think? What do you think, Patrick?
I mean, I don't know of new I mean, I think the thing that we've read a lot about lately is what the last 2 years have been like, because that's fresh in people's mind. And I have to say, I've read some really thoughtful essays about what students reflected on having been essentially shut in their house for 2 years, that they discovered the love of the family that they didn't really realize that they, realized, or, they started exercise. Like, there are real, gems in there about that. I think the other thing that we remember and have to remind, especially like new readers, is we're asking a 17 or 18-year-old to reflect on, generally speaking, I don't know, I can speak from my experience, I hadn't experienced a lot by the time I was 18. And so we're not talking about, a 80-year lifetime to reflect on. We're talking about 17, 18 years. And so the ACL tear, if it ruined the rest of your high school sports career, it is the biggest thing that ever happened to you. If you went to Mexico and did a mission trip and you had never left the country before and you had never experienced poverty like that before, that is the biggest thing. What's important there is the reflection point. I can't read about how your parents won't give you an iPhone later on in your essay. And that used to happen, right? You're reading this really like, wow, they're developing and they're learning, and then you get this like, maybe they didn't get as far as we might have hoped, but that's okay. There's still time, and they're going to come to college and they're going to experience even more. Then they're going to go out in the world and they're going to experience even more. So hopefully they continue to build on that experience and growth.
I just might add one thing. There's something to be said about thoughtful humility in the process and really being mindful about it's the delivery. And I made the ASO joke. It's like, you can talk about it, but it's about what's the journey you traveled, not just describing the situation, right? How does it affect your output as a member of the community? How has it shaped you, and that is important in your life. That's totally fine. It's a matter of like, how are you revealing something about yourself, not just the experience and like telling us the story, but really revealing something that lets us to get to know you better. And if you're doing these trips, like, yes, what's the reflection? But more important, like the voices of citizenship is important, I think, and just saying you're not just an observer, you're engaging it. And I think that's something that's really helpful. And using a tone that shows, thoughtful kind of self-awareness, I think is something I would really think is valuable.
I'm going to ask a last question that has some risk in it, because we only have a couple minutes left before I need to pass this back to Charlene. And this is a question that we could talk about for hours. And in fact, so are the rest of the questions that the audience has submitted. We might need to do this again. But This one's a little scary and risky, so let's see what you guys think. Given the extreme competitive nature of college admissions, some admissions are single digits, students are hiring college consultants to help them. You seem to laugh at polished essays from students, but are you implying that consultants will not give an edge to student applications? It just seems like students can't win. They get help to improve their application, but then they get punished for getting help. College admission is so unfair. Let me just first say that if I thought college admission was so unfair, I personally would not have been involved in it for 27 years. I think where we get the idea that it's unfair is when we start to believe that there are 20 colleges worth attending or life isn't worth living. That's my thought. You three, we'll wrap it up with this one.
I work at an institution that admits over 80% of students. And I agree with Alice. Unfortunately, we focus far too much on far few institutions. So yes, it is competitive. And unfortunately, I've been on panels with people who have said, I wouldn't want to work at an institution more with a higher admission rate than 20%. And to me, that's really sad because I've worked with amazing students who wouldn't get into those schools, but it also is the right fit for them. And there's an institution out there for everyone, and it might have 100% rate and it might have a 1% rate. You got to find out what's best for you.
Thank you. What do you think, Michael?
I think that you're entering a process that's inherently an application process, right? So it can go well and not go well, but there really are over 3,000, I do this lecture every year at this one high school. There are over 3,000 post-secondary institutions. And Gabby, also, I've worked at some of the most selective and some of the most open enrollment. And to Patrick's point, there are amazing students who could get into either way, but they find the school that works best for them. And just kind of speaking about it unfair, it's not being unfair. This is part of the panel. We're just trying to say, like, it's a really textured landscape, and you want to just be mindful and be equipped to best navigate that and level set expectations that not everything's going to go away. If you have resources to help guide the process, certainly do so. But I go back to my comment earlier. We just don't want anyone in this kind of process to undermine the thoughtful integrity and genuine nature, right? And I think that's the concern, is that we're not going to admit the consultant. We're not admitting the parent. We're bringing in that wonderful young individual that's looking to advance themselves educationally, professionally, socially, and personally. And that's what we want to see there. And the best way for us to do this is to see that genuine integrity in the process. So take note of that. It's nothing of offense. And this is all about ingest, because this is a very serious topic, but just know that we are doing this in the sense of service to make sure that you're aware of all the angles, that only the three of us represent a though some scope, we're not the 3,000 schools, right? Not at the college level or at the high school level, but I appreciate the thoughtfulness. So
I'd love to just jump in and say, on the one hand, polish is not what we were teasing. We were not polished. We want students to have polished essays, but we want them to sound like themselves. And I think, so I just want to echo what Patrick and Michael and Alice have all said, whether it's a parent supporting a student, whether it's a wonderful independent educational consultant supporting a student, a high school counselor supporting a student just taking charge of this on their own. I want students to be unabashedly themselves. I want them to be authentic, trust who they are, that who they are is enough. And we hear so much out in the world at the cases and the going through the courts and the way that the media sometimes covers this process. It makes you think that there is not a place for you, right? There's no room in the college world for you. That's the opposite of what is true. There are wonderful, wonderful colleges ready to roll out the red carpet for every student who wants to be in college, and they can have an extraordinary experience at so many different wonderful places, right? So I just want to, my best advice is encourage the children that you're supporting, the students you're supporting. And if you are a student, encourage yourself, have confidence in yourself, just to be authentically yourself. Who you are is enough. And there is a wonderful college, if not dozens of wonderful colleges, right for you.
Thank you so much, panel. I'm going to pass this back to Charlene, but this has certainly been a thoughtful discussion, and we've had some laughing, but we've had a little crying, and we might have to do this again sometime. Charlene?
I think we will. And you know, panel, those final words were really beautiful. There's a reason why we advertise this event saying we have to laugh because otherwise we might cry. We take your kids very seriously. And you could tell by the principled, warm, caring people here tonight who did this really out of the kindness of their hearts because we want to support your kids. So we hope that you take it in that vein. I personally have known Alice Kleeman for close to 3 decades. I know how much she loves teenagers. It surprised even herself how much she loves teenagers. So Michael and Gabby and Patrick, you have been wonderful tonight. Alice, wonderful moderating as always. Parents, there will be a video. Please do share it. And I think we do need part 2 because there were some very excellent questions. Thank you everyone who asked them. We'll be back. But again, thank you everybody for a wonderful evening. A big virtual thank you to our panelists again, Gabrielle, Patrick, Michael, and Alice. Take care, everybody. We hope to see you again soon. Good night.